Welcome to World at Work TV. I'm Allison Avalos and I'm joined by Kerry Chou. And today we're talking about the basics of market pricing. Kerry, let's start off on the ground level. What is market pricing?
Well, Allison, market pricing is essentially the process by which we determine the value of a job or jobs in our organization. Now, for purposes of our discussion, when we're talking about market pricing, value, we're referring specifically to a wage or a salary that's paid to an individual. And we can think of market pricing both at kind of a macro level and a micro level. So at the micro level, we have a job, let's say an accountant, and we are really trying to determine what is the value of that job that's being paid in the marketplace. And our marketplace is really our competitors, those organizations that we are competing against for talent, and determining what is the value that's being paid in the marketplace for that job so that we can in turn price our job to be competitive. At more of a macro level, we can use market pricing as really an entire job evaluation system where we are determining which grade or which level within the organization a job is going to be placed based primarily or even solely on the market value that's being placed on that job in the market. So really we can look at it from an individual job level, or we can look at it all the way at an organization-wide process for job evaluation.
We know from surveys that World at Work has conducted over the years that market pricing is the primary method of job evaluation used. Why do you think it's the preferred method that companies are using to value their jobs?
Market pricing, I think, is the predominant method now because it's really indicative of the workforce that we have in place today. You know, if we kind of rewind about 30 or 40 years, you might get your training, you might get your education, and then you would be hired by an employer, and you would work for that employer for 35 or 40 years. You'd get your gold watch, you'd get your pension, and you know, everything was great. You could spend your entire career with one employer, or maybe a couple of employers. Now, if we fast forward to today, it's really not likely that you'll get a resume across your desk from an experienced candidate with only one employer. They may have 5, they may have 10, they may have 15. And so the days where you would sort of be coddled and taken care of by one employer and you really didn't necessarily have to worry about moving to different employers or changing companies, you know, those days are really long gone. To where employers now are, they look at a resume, and if they see multiple employers, they would look at that positively to say, hey, this person has worked in different organizations, is probably more adaptable, more flexible. And so with that, I think employees are much more cognizant. There's certainly a lot of data that's available to them now that wasn't in the past in terms of what are competitive rates. And so as employees have become more nimble and more flexible in changing jobs, employers have recognized that and recognized the need to be as competitive as they can. And I think for that reason, we've moved from job evaluation processes that were more internally focused on jobs relative to other jobs within organizations to market pricing, which is really looking at what are external companies and competitors paying.
So external competitiveness is the focus of market pricing as your job evaluation method?
Yes.
Are there some rules of the road when market pricing jobs?
What I would say first of all is it's important when we're talking about market pricing to have a consistent methodology. There are a myriad of sources, a myriad of surveys, and within each of those surveys we have all sorts of different statistics. We have means, we have averages, we have medians, we have 75th percentile data, 25th percentile data. And so one of the chief purposes of collecting salary survey data is to see what's happening to the market, how is it changing over time. To the extent that you're not really using a common methodology, let's say, for example, in year one, you use a survey and you use median data or the 50th percentile data, and then year two, you use a different survey and you use the mean instead of the median. Well, you're just opening yourself up to much more, not necessarily knowing that the market has changed, but you're really looking at two different sources, two different statistics. And so for that reason, develop a methodology. Which surveys are we going to use? Which statistics are we going to use? When are we going to assess our market competitiveness, and then do that on a consistent basis? You with respect to the sources that we use, I think it's very important that you also try to use consistent sources. If you have an extremely robust survey, you may be able to use one or two surveys and those completely cover your industry, and you would be just fine with those. From a statistical standpoint, of course, the more survey sources that we use, the more data points that we're able to use, the better we're able to gauge. So when possible, we encourage you to use a variety of survey sources, and that way you can triangulate data. You can look at the same job from multiple surveys. Maybe one is a little stronger in terms of number of companies, maybe another is a little bit stronger in terms of the company size that you're using. And from that way, you can use multiple sources and validate the different ones, the different data points that you have.
So when you're talking about multiple sources, you're talking about two pieces. One, which might be needing multiple sources to get a good picture of all of your jobs or the majority of your jobs. But the other side of that is getting multiple sources for each individual job and perhaps weighting those surveys based on which surveys are a better fit for your organization. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and a great point, because most organizations are pretty large. They have a large number of jobs, and it's probably unlikely that you're going to have one survey that's going to cover all of those. And so to your point, yeah, we need multiple data sources to be able to encompass as many jobs as we can. To your other point, it's very valuable to be able to look at an accountant in this survey source and the same, or at least the same as possible, accountant job in the second or third survey source, and be able to look and compare. Are those data points relatively close together? That's validating. If two of them are close together and one of them's way off, either way high or way low, maybe that's a data source that we need to look at more closely and decide, do we really want to include this?
How about any tips when it comes to hot jobs or critical skill sets?
Well, I think the thing to keep in mind with hot jobs and critical skill sets is really the point. Almost by definition, hot jobs and critical skills are those that, for whatever reason, have really seen a spike, usually up, of course, in terms of market rates. Now, that spike in a particular job may be a one-year duration. It might go on for 2 years. It might go on for 5 years. But it's really important for us to sort of track those and keep those sort of in mind, so that we're always looking, how is the market moving? Now, obviously, because it's a hot job, you think as an organization that it's important. Those individuals are serving critical functions, and so, of course, we even, maybe more than other jobs, need to keep on top of what the market is paying. We also need to keep in mind that hot jobs and critical skills, more or less, are not going to last forever. So a skill might be particularly relevant for a few years, and then it's going to drop off. And we need to keep mind of that, because we have individuals maybe that are getting more aggressive salary increases, and those may need to be leveled off at some point.
And quickly, when it comes to the frequency of market pricing efforts, is it typical that an organization maybe once a year looks at various jobs? I imagine there are cases where based on an immediate need because you have a new job or perhaps an inequity that comes to light that you want to look into something. But is this something that happens on an annual basis for most organizations? Do you need to be looking at these jobs more frequently or less frequently?
Certainly, on a general level, I would recommend that organizations do a pricing of their jobs at least once per year. I know that some organizations, maybe in very stable markets, might do it every other year or every third year. And you know, as long as you're taking into account the risks associated with longer intervals, you know, in between pricings, that might be fine for your organization. But generally speaking, I think once a year, many survey sources will publish their data once per year. But to your point, hot jobs, critical skill sets, significant reorganizations that you might have in certain pockets of your company that might necessitate that you do more frequent pricing.
Thank you, Kerry. For World at Work TV, I'm Allison Avalos.